The Petroleum Empire. Why America will go to war for every single drop. The United States is not just a country. It's a massive, gas-guzzling war machine that would literally collapse into total anarchy in 48 hours if the global flow of oil ever stopped. Every single bullet fired by the military, every package delivered to your front door, and every single calorie of food sitting on your dinner plate is completely soaked in crude oil. The lengths the American government will go to protect the supply are absolutely terrifying and often involve secrets that would make your skin crawl. But the real reason why this obsession has turned into a literal bloodlust isn't just about keeping the lights on. It's about a secret financial pact made in the shadows of the 1970s that is currently on the verge of a catastrophic collapse. I'll reveal the truth about that specific document later in this video. You see, for the last century, the story of American power has been written in black ink, and that ink is petroleum. We are talking about a substance that is more valuable than gold because it is the very lifeblood of modern civilization. Without it, the world stops spinning, and the American dream turns into a nightmare of empty shelves and dark cities. This isn't just about economics, it's about a desperate, high-stakes game of global chess where the pieces are tanks and the board is the entire Middle East. You might think we are moving toward a green future, but the reality is that the hunger for oil has never been more intense or more dangerous than it is right now. It is a madness that dictates who lives, who dies, and which nations are allowed to prosper on the global stage today. To understand this addiction, we have to look back at the moment the United States realized that oil was the ultimate weapon of war. During World War II, the Allied forces literally floated to victory on a wave of American oil, proving that the side with the most fuel would always dictate the terms of peace. It was a wake-up call that changed the course of history forever. Suddenly, the vast deserts of the Middle East weren't just sand and heat, they were the most important real estate on the planet. The American government realized that if they didn't control the taps, someone else would, and that was a risk they were never willing to take. This realization sparked a century of interventions, covert operations, and alliances with some of the most controversial regimes in human history, all for the sake of securing that precious flow. One of the most pivotal moments in this saga happened on a ship in the middle of the Suez Canal in 1945. President Franklin D. Roosevelt met with King Abdulaziz of Saudi Arabia to strike a deal that would define the next 80 years of global geopolitics. The agreement was simple. The United States would provide military protection and security for the Saudi kingdom, and in exchange, they would get guaranteed access to the world's largest oil reserves. It was a marriage of convenience that ignored human rights and democratic values in favor of raw energy security. This handshake set the stage for everything that followed, from the Cold War proxy battles to the massive military bases that now dot the Arabian Peninsula. It was the birth of an energy empire that relied on a fragile balance of power and a lot of guns. But the story gets even darker when you realize that oil isn't just used for fuel, it's used to back the American dollar itself. In 1971, when the US finally abandoned the gold standard, they needed something else to give their currency value. They turned back to their old friends in the Middle East and struck a deal that forced the entire world to buy oil using only US dollars. This created a global demand for the dollar that has allowed America to print money and run up massive debts without facing the consequences that would destroy any other nation. This is the petrodollar system, and it is the hidden pillar of American global dominance. If a country tries to sell oil in another currency, the American response is usually swift, decisive, and often involves a complete change in that country's leadership through force. Think about the wars of the last few decades and ask yourself if they were really about spreading democracy or if they were about protecting the dollar's grip on the oil market. When Saddam Hussein decided he wanted to sell Iraq's oil in euros instead of dollars, the drums of war began to beat almost immediately in Washington. When Muammar Gaddafi proposed a gold-backed African currency for oil trade, his regime was dismantled in a matter of months. You might call it a coincidence, but in the world of high-stakes energy politics, there are no coincidences, only calculations. The American military acts as the ultimate enforcer for this global energy bank, ensuring that no one steps out of line and threatens the financial monopoly that keeps the US economy afloat while the rest of the world struggles to keep up. This lust for oil has created a bizarre paradox where the US claims to be the leader of the free world while propping up dictators who control the pumps. It's a game of hypocrisy where the rhetoric of freedom is constantly sacrificed at the altar of the barrel. You see it in the way the US responds to different international crises. If a country has no oil, their human rights abuses are often ignored, but if they sit on a sea of crude, suddenly they are a top priority for intervention.
This inconsistency has bred deep resentment across the globe, leading to the rise of new powers who are tired of playing by American rules. Yet the machine keeps grinding forward because the alternative, a world where America loses its energy leverage, is something the planners in the Pentagon refuse to even contemplate. Even with the rise of fracking and domestic production, the US cannot simply walk away from global oil markets. You might hear politicians brag about energy independence, but that is largely a myth designed to win votes. The global oil market is an interconnected web where a disruption in the Strait of Hormuz immediately spikes prices in Ohio. Because oil is a globally traded commodity, the US is still tied to the whims of OPEC and the stability of the Middle East. Furthermore, American refineries are often built to process specific types of heavy foreign crude, meaning they can't even use all the light oil they produce at home. This means the US is still forced to play the role of the world's policeman, patrolling shipping lanes and keeping the peace in volatile regions to ensure the global economy doesn't face a sudden shock. The sheer scale of the American military's fuel consumption is almost impossible to wrap your head around. The Department of Defense is the single largest institutional consumer of petroleum in the entire world. It takes an incredible amount of oil just to move the ships and planes that are used to secure more oil. It is a self-perpetuating cycle of consumption and control that requires a constant influx of resources to maintain. Every carrier strike group and every long-range bomber is a testament to the power of petroleum. This massive footprint means that even if every civilian car in America went electric tomorrow, the military-industrial complex would still be tethered to the oil well for decades to come. The infrastructure of war is built on carbon, and changing that foundation would require a total reimagining of how power is projected globally. Now, let's talk about the secret I mentioned earlier, the document that could bring this whole house of cards crashing down. Recently, the decades-old agreement between the US and Saudi Arabia regarding the petrodollar has faced its biggest challenge yet. Reports are surfacing that the Saudis are now open to selling oil to China in yuan, a move that would have been unthinkable just a decade ago. If the world stops needing dollars to buy oil, the value of the US currency could plummet, leading to hyperinflation and the end of the American century. This isn't just a boring financial shift, it's an existential threat to the way of life for every single American. The mad lust for oil is now a desperate scramble to prevent a global shift in power that would leave the US holding a worthless pile of paper. As we look toward the future, the tension between the old world of oil and the new world of green energy is reaching a breaking point. While the US government talks about climate change and carbon footprints, they are simultaneously expanding drilling and strengthening military ties with oil-rich nations. They know that the transition to renewables will take decades, and in the meantime, whoever controls the oil controls the transition itself. Controlling the remaining reserves gives the US the power to dictate the pace of global change and ensure that their rivals, like China, don't get ahead. It's a brutal, cynical strategy that prioritizes national survival over global environmental health. The stakes have never been higher, and the room for error is shrinking every single day as the world's population continues to grow and demand more. You might be wondering why more people aren't screaming about this from the rooftops. The reason is that the oil industry is deeply embedded in every level of the political system. From lobbying groups to campaign contributions, the black gold lobby ensures that the status quo remains untouched. They have spent billions of dollars to frame the conversation around national security and economic stability to distract from the reality of the situation. It's a masterclass in manipulation that has kept the public focused on the price at the pump, while the real decisions are made in closed boardrooms and secret bunkers. We are told that we need oil to survive, and while that may be true in the short term, the long-term cost of this addiction is a world plagued by constant warfare and environmental destruction. The human cost of this petroleum obsession is measured in millions of lives lost in conflicts that are rarely called oil wars by the media. We use words like liberation and counterterrorism, but the maps of the battlefields almost always align perfectly with the maps of the pipelines. From the scorched earth of Kuwait to the ruins of Benghazi, the scent of crude is never far from the smoke of battle. This is the reality of the American power structure. It is an empire built on the most volatile substance on Earth. It is a system that requires constant growth and constant expansion, leading to an inevitable collision with other rising powers who want their own share of the prize. The world is becoming a very small place for such a large and hungry machine to operate. If you've made it this far, you realize that the mad lust for oil isn't just a policy choice, it's the very foundation of the modern world order. We are living through a historical pivot point where the old rules are being rewritten in real time. The question isn't whether the oil will run out, but whether the system built on it will collapse before we can find a way to move past it. The American government is doubled down on a bet that has lasted 80 years, but the house is starting to lose its edge. As the petrodollar weakens and new energy sources emerge, the desperation of the petroleum empire will only grow, leading to even more unpredictable and dangerous behavior on the world stage today. This is the hidden reality of our time, and ignoring it won't make the consequences any less severe. The truth is that the power of petroleum is a double-edged sword that has given America incredible wealth, but also tethered it to a cycle of endless violence. As the secret pacts of the past begin to crumble, and the global economy shifts toward new horizons, we are all witnesses to the end of an era. Whether this transition is a peaceful evolution or a violent collapse depends on whether we can finally break the addiction to black gold. The future of US power is no longer decided in Washington, but in the oil fields and currency markets of a world that is tired of being told what to do. The mask is slipping, and the engine of empire is starting to smoke. The only question left is what happens when the tank finally runs dry and the lights go out. If you've made it this far, you realize that the power of petroleum is a double-edged sword that has given America incredible wealth, but also tethered it to a cycle of endless violence. As the secret pacts of the past begin to crumble and the global economy shifts toward new horizons, we are all witnesses to the end of an era. Whether this transition is a peaceful evolution or a violent collapse depends on whether we can finally break the addiction to black gold. The future of U.S. power is no longer decided in Washington, but in the oil fields and currency markets of a world that is tired of being told what to do. The mask is slipping, and the engine of empire is starting to smoke. The only question left is what happens when the tank finally runs dry and the lights go out. If you want to be part of the 1% who actually understands how the world works while everyone else is distracted by headlines, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button and join our circle of truth seekers, because the mainstream media will never tell you what we just discussed. The world is changing faster than you think, and if you want to survive the coming shifts in global power, you need to stay informed with the real stories behind the scenes. Don't be left in the dark when the oil stops flowing and the dollar loses its grip. Click that button now to stay ahead of the curve.